You have all these people at the same time who connect with the athlete world, right? Like they are former athletes or forever athletes, as we call them, right? They're already out there. The community is already out there. What we lack is the infrastructure for that community. And that's where the post comes in. We just want to be the infrastructure for this community to get plugged into and connect with each other. And what we know is a tremendous amount of potential. How do we leverage that and unlock as much of that potential as possible?
Christian Ponder, thanks for joining me on The Game Plan.
Yeah, of course, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
So you're about 5 years removed now from your NFL career as a first-round draft pick. You know, played quarterback in the league. Very few people on this planet can say that. When you look back at your not just professional football career, but also the great years you had at Florida State, had grown up with football such a key part of your everyday life. What kind of emotions does that evict for you, and how do you contextualize that versus what you're doing now?
Yeah, I grew up around sports. Both my parents were athletes. My dad played collegiate football and then played a few years professionally in the NFL and in the CFL. And sport has been a part of my identity for a very long time. And it's funny now because when I left sport, I missed it, but I also wanted to distance myself. It's like, all right, the next chapter is starting. Like, let's kind of fully remove yourself from that environment. And then obviously I realized, I missed it. But I also, now that I have kids who are now in the age of playing sport and living in New York City, where kind of putting them in these organized leagues is a little bit more difficult than growing up in the suburbs of Dallas. And but realizing the importance and the value that sport creates, especially in our youth and even going further into, high school and collegiate and professional sports. And, it's a tremendous developmental tool. And there's a lot of data that backs this up. But, I played 6 years in the NFL and left on my own accord, could have kept playing, but I was at the point in my career where it was going to be a consummate journeyman where, we had one kid in our second on the way and was it worth moving myself and my family every year to a new city? And when I was at Florida State, I got my MBA and was excited for the next chapter. And when I left, it was much more difficult than I anticipated. Although I tried to distance myself from it, that probably made it more difficult because it's so hard for so many of us when it's such a deep-seated part of identity and who we are and what we're interested in. Overnight it's gone, and there's a lot of data on the issues and depression, and it's a big struggle for so many people, and that's really been a motivating factor for what I'm doing now and starting a business that's trying to tackle this issue. But I've really kind of thought about why this is an issue, and my thesis kind of boiled down to four things that we lose when we're done playing, and you lose a part of your identity or a big part of your identity. You lose a sense of purpose, right? Especially to get to the collegiate and professional levels, it's like, hey, this is the end, and everything else is a means to that end, and it's not a good feeling when the end is over, and it's like, okay, now what? My sense of purpose is gone, and then you lose your kind of routine, right? We were always being told what to do, when to do it, and where to do it by somebody at all times, and that's kind of gone when it's over. You're left to your own devices, and then the last one being a loss of community, right? We were on teams in locker rooms our whole lives, and again overnight it's gone. And we're as humans, we're built to be connected with others, and so with the business now, it's how do we tap into that red thread of the athlete identity and build community around that, and unlock a tremendous amount of potential that exists that we can kind of talk about as we take part in this conversation.
Yeah, it really affirms a lot of the things we've talked about over the many episodes of the Game Plan that we've had. We always reflect on team, routine, and competition, and the loss of those three. Obviously, as a pro athlete, the loss of identity is tremendous. Yeah. So I think it's a really good segue, though, into what you're building now, because I think you're trying to fulfill that for a lot of athletes. Tell us about The Post.
Yeah, so The Post is my business that I've co-founded with my partner, Jason LaRose, who's the former president of North America for Under Armour, who left Under Armour and became the CEO of Equinox Media, which Equinox Media was an arm of Equinox Gyms who as they saw the rise of Peloton, like they understood the need to create kind of a digital platform for their brands of Equinox Gyms and SoulCycle and some of the other brands that they have under the umbrella of Equinox. And so they spun off this own company, and Jason was the CEO of Equinox Media for a bit, and fortunate to have him a part of what we're building with the Post. But the origins of the Post, again, are just rooted in my own personal journey, which is a shared experience with so many others and in life after sport. And it's the convergence of two things. Number one being like the loss of that identity and the big part of who we are and athletes. And what we term is we don't call ourselves former athletes. Like we love this term of forever athletes, because when you reach those highest levels, it's so deeply ingrained into who you are that we don't think it ever leaves you, right? Like we saw this great quote by Jeff Immelt about, as he's the CEO of GE and chairman of GE, he talks about, I don't daydream about deals or spreadsheets or any of that in business. When I daydream, it's only about football. And this is someone who's the pinnacle of his professional career in life after sport, and yet he still reminisces about sport. And I think that's just who we are. I think sport has given us so much, and it kind of, a lot was taken away when it was over. And so you have this side of the coin that there's this whole experience and environments and people that we miss, that we grew up with in childhood, and that's very nostalgic to us. And on the other side of that coin is the tremendous developmental tool that sport is. And when you look at people who got to college and professional sports, yeah, there was talent there, right? Like there's a minimum requirement of talent, but a lot of people have talent who never make it to those highest levels of sports, right? It really comes down to the soft skills of the work ethic and the leadership and the grittiness and being goal oriented and always striving to get better and dealing with failure and dealing with success, and really all these soft skills that sport teaches you. And so for those that achieve the highest level of sport, those qualities will make you successful in anything else in life, right? Like you just have to take it from the scope of athletic ability and apply it to the scope of business and professional potential. And so what we want to do with the Post is those two converging things. Let's create the same type of ecosystem that existed for sports, right? Like the ecosystem of my teammates and my peers in a locker room with the assistance of coaches and trainers and kind of that whole ecosystem of team sport. And mimic that in the same way in the scope of business. So having your peers, right? Like the people that we have the common red thread of being an athlete, a collegiate or professional athlete, like that identity, like tapping into the identity with this group of people who's very exclusive to this community, and then providing executive coaches and experts on specific industries and creating a lot of content and education around value adds that will help you progress in your career in life after sport, and again unlock that business potential, which I didn't touch on it, but when you look at the statistics of athletes, so there's about 5 million athletes that have played collegiate sports or have gone through the NCAA since 1982, and so that makes about like a little less than 1.3% of the U.S. population, and yet out of that small population, it accounts for more than half of Fortune 500 CEOs. More than half of Fortune 500 CEOs were former collegiate athletes. You can actually find online it says 95% of those CEOs in 2015 were former collegiate athletes. I won't go that far, but I'll just say it's more than half. 52% of women in the C-suite today are former collegiate athletes, and 15 of the last 21 U.S. presidents are former collegiate athletes, right? So there's data that backs up that athletes have a tremendous amount of potential in whatever they put their mind to. And so we want to help that in any way. I think it starts with community. It starts with leveraging, you can do a deep dive into behavioral science and the power of communities and power of being around others, but we want to create this exclusive community and culture for the most ambitious athletes as they leave sport and really want to have a significant impact in business and life after sport.
I love that. And I think back to my collegiate days. I played basketball in college, Division III. That's where about a 6'4" white center typically shows up. But I was always the most dialed in, during the season, really, because you have that structure, you have the team, you're all kind of on the same mission and same page. And so I want to drill in more to the specifics of the Post. But before we do that, we've kind of have the tent poles now, right? Of your playing career, heading into retirement, and now what you're doing as an entrepreneur. But take us through the in-between, kind of the journey for yourself of becoming an entrepreneur and what that transition's been like, just to get kind of into the office world, so to speak, being on Zoom calls and whatnot all day.
Yeah. So my last year was in 2016 with San Francisco, and like I mentioned before, I got my MBA while I was at Florida State, and kind of naturally thought that, growing up, I had always had an interest in like the markets, the stock market. So I thought I would kind of transition into wealth management, focusing on athletes. I thought that was a natural bridge there. And my wife had just taken a job. She had already worked for ESPN doing college football, and she moved up to the NFL and became the host of the Sunday NFL Countdown show on ESPN, and which was at the time in Connecticut. Now it's actually in New York City, but we had talked about living in New York and ambitions of doing that, and so this gave us the opportunity to move to New York City, and so we did that, and obviously for her job, but also to help me figure out kind of what I wanted to do next, and so started exploring the wealth management route, and spent a good amount of time and energy in that, and found it to not be a great fit. My assumption there was wrong, and it didn't work out. And so that led me to an opportunity to join a hedge fund in New York City, and started going down that road again. And again, that didn't work out. And was actually introduced to entrepreneurship through a mutual friend that we have, Joe Risk, who's his daughter is my daughter's best friend in school. And so Joe started talking about venture capital and entrepreneurship, and something that was a little unfamiliar with me. But kind of took me under his wing and led to some great introductions, and invited me to this event that his firm Runyon was hosting, and met some great people who wanted to help me out, and really started kind of pushing me towards this space, and started making some angel investments, and fell in love with this space, and started kind of putting my entrepreneurial hat on and thinking about some things that we could solve, and actually started building an app for football players to study their playbooks, like an interactive way, kind of gamifying playbook study, and think like Duolingo for playbooks, and put some money into that, and kind of backed out of it when I realized, like, hey, I'm gonna have to keep putting money into this of my own, or I'm gonna raise money, and for such a niche product that was going to be difficult to raise, and kind of got a much broader vision on, okay, like what's a bigger kind of problem that we can address, and started thinking about the transition to life after sport that I had just experienced. That was difficult for me, and is that's such a shared experience for so many others, and what are the things that we can address, and or how can we address that? So we started looking at some of these community-based businesses that have been successful, like the Soho Houses of the world, or the YPOs or Chiefs, or even as I've been on this 14-month journey of validating and growing this idea of this business. There's been a bunch of other kind of community-based businesses that have popped up, and so saw the opportunity to kind of take some of the best of these different businesses and apply it to this, to the athlete community, and again, kind of reintroduce. Right, you have all these people at the same time who connect with the athlete world, right? Like they are former athletes, or forever athletes, as we call them, right? They're already out there. The community is already out there. What we lack is the infrastructure for that community. And that's where the post comes in. We just want to be the infrastructure for this community to get plugged into, and connect with each other. And again, like what we think is, and what we know is a tremendous amount of potential. How do we leverage that and unlock as much of that potential as possible?
Yeah, and it's great to kind of hear more about your journey into where you're at now versus where you first started, whether that was looking more in the corporate or investment world, or your first startup. What are some of the similarities in entrepreneurship, whether it's in a journey or a daily routine, to that of being an athlete that you really get fired up about, almost because it uses some of those same muscles?
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's so much crossover between being an athlete and being an entrepreneur. I think there's just a natural fit that exists there. And I think, as we're building out the post and start identifying like who we are calling like our 100 founding members, who are really kind of setting what the culture is inside of the post, and then growing from there. So finding those professional and collegiate athletes, it really leans heavily entrepreneurial, because a lot of those same muscles you need in sport are the exact same muscles that you exercise in entrepreneurship, and it's that competitiveness. And you have to have the work ethic. It takes a tremendous amount of work to go from just an idea to actually building a business, and then teamwork and communication, right, are tremendously important in the startup experience. And there's just so much crossover. But I think it's a great outlet for your competitiveness, because it's like, you're finding other business that you're competing against, but you're really just competing against the statistics of what failure is in the startup world, right? Like the vast majority don't succeed, and I'm competing against that. Like how do we account for what could potentially cause us to fail? I need to account for that, and I'm competing against that. How do I make sure that I work hard enough that I can discount or remove those risks of failure? And obviously that's never fully going to happen. But I think, if you look at the Tom Brady's of the world, those who have achieved the highest pinnacles of sport, the best, I think what separates them is work ethic. And I think you can say the same thing about the startup world.
What do you think about coming into this, especially as you're raising venture capital and there's all this different kind of lingo and nomenclature? Us fans on the sidelines think about that with like a playbook and all the different things you need to learn. But the reality is, once you kind of unpack it and are able to learn it and demystify it, it's probably exciting to kind of feel like you have more control almost.
Yeah, it is. I think it's just with anything, right? Like when you actually when you're outside of the environment or that type of community, it seems really unfamiliar. But once you get plugged in, especially I think with athletes, like we're so used to studying game. Like you gotta, as a football player, I had a week to download and become an expert in a game plan, right? Like that's a short amount of time. Especially at the highest levels, like there's a lot of pressure for you to understand what you're doing and then go out and perform and execute that game plan at an extremely high level. And so we're used to learning on the fly and growing really, really quickly and becoming experts in things in a short amount of time. And it's the same thing in whether it's entrepreneurship or it's wealth management or whatever. Like I think athletes, again, have this tremendous ability to kind of assimilate into a specific environment very quickly. There are some difficulties, again, that go back to as an athlete, like I'm not sure what I'm interested in outside of sport when I'm done and kind of figuring those things out. But I think, especially with the post, can we help you with that and figuring that out by plugging you in with the right people and making the right connections with you and everything. And some other things that we're going to do as we build out our business model. But, can we help you efficiently figure that out and get you plugged in the right people and assimilate into the right environment? And then once you get there, like, the world is your oyster. Like you have a tremendous amount of potential. A lot of us, our dreams ended at sport, right? Like when I was a kid, my dream wasn't to get the NFL. My dream was to play college sports. And when you achieve a dream at such a young age, it's like, okay, what is my next dream? And a lot of us don't have it. And so what I hope the post is for a lot of people is just, we want to give you new dreams. We want to help figure out what that new dream is and give you the permission to do so. A lot of us just need permission. You have the potential. It's already there. We're giving you the permission to have dreams beyond sport, and we're going to help you do it.
Yeah, so let's double click on the post a bit more. You mentioned kind of some initial insights you had, whether it be going to Soho House or probably a better comp is like Chief and YPO, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
What does the post look like, and why is 2021 and beyond kind of the right moment in time for this company to succeed?
So the post is a network, right? Is a network of forever athletes, and not just any forever athletes. It's the most ambitious. So it's exclusive to those who want to have a tremendous impact in business and life after sport. And so what is a network? A network is a group of people who have something to connect about and a means through which to connect. And so what we're going to connect about is sports and its business, and how we're going to connect is through an app and through physical space, right? So if you look at a Chief, like you said, who's our closest comp, it's a lot of the network elements of like small group models, right? We're going to plug you in with your kind of your closest teammates of 7 to 9 other people who we're going to be very purposeful and intentional on who those people are going to be, that you're going to be plugged with. It's going to be highly curated, and we're going to have a great process of how we decide that. And you're going to meet on a monthly basis or whatever. You're going to have an executive coach at your disposal to help you work through some things that are challenging in your business. Again, like you had coaches in sports, we're going to give you coaches in business, and there's going to be access to mentors, there's going to be access to experts and content and and teaching and education. And but really what defines it, the post, is the community that's there to push you, right? Like, when I work out, if I'm trying to work out on my own, I'm inconsistent at its best. If I have 3 other guys that are like, all right, we're working out 4 times a week at 6 a.m., I'm going to be there every time. And that's the power that we want to harness in community, is leveraging that accountability and the power of the other to push me and be better at whatever I want to do, and the challenge. I think there's a real opportunity in today's society where we're more connected to the quantity of people, but in terms of quality, it's hard to find. I think we're a mile wide but an inch deep, and I think that's just the nature of social media, right? There's a lot of benefit of social media, but you look at, I don't know if you watched that documentary on Netflix, Social Dilemma, right? Like the rise of loneliness and depression, and especially our youth. With the rise of technology and social media. And I think really a lot of that has to do with our lack of community and lack of like physical connection. And so one of the benefits one of the value adds that we want to bring with the post is how do we bring people together in physical space? And that's having clubhouses starting in New York City, maybe not as ambitious as a Soho House, but having some sort of footprint of like an upscale sports bar where I can go and grab a beer with some friends who were former athletes and watch a game together and have, like, I want to bring, make organized sports for adults, like, acceptable, like, why I miss having a competitive outlet. Like, I played sports when I was a kid, and then suddenly overnight I don't anymore. And so, like, why aren't we bringing that back? Like, why can't we have a basketball league and a flag football league or a softball league in Central Park? And then having, as we really go at scale, we have these clubhouses and these footprints in all these different cities. Like, let's talk about basketball. Like, what if you had a bunch of former collegiate basketball players who missed playing? We have local tournaments in New York City. You have a local tournament in San Francisco and LA and Phoenix and Miami, whatever. And then the winners of those local tournaments, we fly everyone in New York City, and we're going to have the 2023 post-national championship basketball tournament, and we're going to declare one winner of that, right? Like, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that is us as athletes that we missed and that we no longer can tap into, that we will create and we should create and enjoy ourselves again and kind of tap back into that athletic identity.
Yeah, I love that. I moved to New York 12 years ago, and I knew one person, but I ended up playing a lot of pickup ball, and that's kind of how I met so many different people, and it's always been a great connection. So one thing I kind of want to ask about as it relates to building this really strong community that so much value can be derived out of, whether it's in business relationships or motivation or friendships or, so many different ways. But what also happens is there's kind of like a lot of leakage, for lack of a better term, of that value then being attributed back to the post, right? Or like the entity that was kind of the platform for this engagement in the first place. So certainly you want to enable people to connect in many different ways and experience that. But how do you handle kind of the attribution, so to speak, especially since you'll be primarily like a membership fee-based organization? How do you really strengthen that connection point back to the post?
Yeah, look, I think everything we do, hopefully, rewind. We talked about before, like the post, we want to be the facilitator of relationships, right? Like the facilitator of relationships, the facilitator of knowledge. I think really to be successful in things, it comes down to 2 things. It comes down to relationships and it comes down to knowledge. And so we want to facilitate those things. And so, honestly, if you're successful, whatever you're doing, obviously we hope the post is assisting in that. And if we are, great. But our goal here is to help. And so if we aren't necessarily getting the full recognition of we helped you, then that's okay with us. But we really, we hope that we become the place, the go-to place for former athletes, right? I was talking to you earlier, Tim, about clear pathways, right? When we were in middle school, there's a clear pathway to becoming a high school athlete. When we were in high school, there's a clear pathway to becoming a collegiate athlete. When we were in college, there was a clear pathway to the next step of being a professional athlete. And when you're done being a professional athlete, there's no longer a clear pathway to what's next. And so our hope is under the umbrella of the Post, we have these really ambitious former athletes doing incredible things in life after sport. And now when I'm done playing, it's like, that's the place, that's the aspirational place that I want to go plug into and be a part of, and really help my next and whatever's next for me in life after sport. And so we hope that a lot of that facilitation is under the umbrella of the Post, whether it's through our app or it's through live events or physical clubhouse. We do hope that we create some really strong bonds that exist beyond the Post and outside of that umbrella. And that means we're doing our job well, right? And if that means we hope that we create a tremendous amount of value where as you progress in your journey in life after sport, that you still engage with us. But if you get to a point where, hey, I'm in a great spot, I'm doing well professionally, I've found my tribe through the Post, and I don't no longer necessarily need it, and you decide to leave, then great. I hope that's a success for us. That's a win for us that we've helped you get to a spot where you've left and you have this a sense of autonomy and independence, and we helped you get there. That's awesome. But we do hope, through the sporting events and kind of the social elements of the Post that, we provide value and you want to stay connected with us, whether you're 25, 45, 65, 75, again, that athletic identity is so strong that you always want to be a part of this community, and the Post is the place to connect into those roots.
So a lot of the listeners are both either are current or former athletes, and they're probably getting really excited hearing you talk about all of this. What can they expect from the Post in terms of the opportunity for them to engage?
Yeah, so we plan on launching in Q1 of 22. You touched on it before. We're in the middle of a fundraise that's going to get us to launch. We're building out our team. We're going to launch a website. So if you're interested, you will be able to log on and submit to be a part of that wait list. And then, we're going to start with, 100 founding members that we're going to handpick, a mix of what we call professional athletes and athletic professionals, right? Professional athlete is someone obviously who played at the highest level, whereas as we weigh who's a member and who's not, if you're a professional athlete, then your business expertise isn't as important. But we know you're going to provide value to the Post. You have to have some, bare minimum, expression of hey, I have some ambition in life after sport. And then the other side is the athletic professional, where your playing days ended earlier at college, but you've progressed and have this tremendous career in life after sport, and you're doing really well. And but you still want to plug into that athletic identity. I think that's the magical mix that we're going to create. And so as we look at those 100 founding members, it's going to be 50 professional athletes, 50 athletic professionals. We'll launch with them. They're really going to help us curate the culture of the Post, of being this place that's highly, full of highly ambitious people, high performing people that again want to have a significant impact in business. And then we'll go from there. We'll start creating classes. We'll aggregate demand. So if it'll probably be through a referral process and an application process. This isn't going to be for everyone. We're going to be super picky on who's involved and who's a member. And then we'll have some rolling classes. So we'll build up we'll have our founding member class that's going to launch in Q1. We'll follow that up in 30 to 60 days with our next class of 100 the Post members. We'll bring them into the community, and then we'll keep going from there. And we're going to primarily focus on New York City from the beginning, and we'll expand outward. But we're being a little bit geographic agnostic right now. I think anyone who really kind of expresses the identity of who we want to be a part of the culture of the Post. We want you in. We want you on board. We want to learn from you and how we can serve you. And I think you can reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, Instagram if you want to reach out and talk more about this. But we'll have a website up in the next month that'll kind of be a place to go to express interest in what we're doing. And but we'd love to hear feedback from anyone that is interested in having a conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see it all come together. We're going to wish you best of luck as you get into the fundraising mode and raise the funds and get members on board. We'll obviously promote the Post and put you out there in our channels. So, Christian Bonner, thanks for joining us on the Game Plan.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.